Inside the Sixers we go. Michael Kaskey-Blomain, CBS Sports, set to join us here. He covers the NBA, covers the Sixers, and he, like all guests, appear via the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Michael Kaskey-Blomain, of course, the Sixers finishing up this road trip here against the Cleveland Cavaliers. That's tonight here on 97.3 ESPN. What's going on, my man?
What's up, Mike? How you doing?
All is good. A little opening day for baseball. And you a baseball guy at all?
Yeah, I'm not huge, but I follow it. Obviously, watch the Phillies, try to get to some games every year.
All right. I know Sixers and the NBA is obviously what your work is and you cover, but opening day is always a little nice. I'm a baseball guy, but big news for the big man. It looks like Joel Embiid is going to be back and ready to go on Saturday.
Yeah, that's the word, Mike. I think obviously the Sixers were cautious with the injury. They didn't want to rush him back. They didn't want to bring him out to the road trip, but now, he's been progressing nicely from the injury. There hasn't been any further issues. He's been ramping his conditioning up slowly over the past week or two. And, I think now it's a good time, especially since, the Sixers just dropped in the standings, half a game behind the Nets. They need him now.
They do, and I want to ask you, obviously you've seen them play with and without him. We've seen them play without him in the past. What did you take from them? Did you learn anything about this team from them playing without him over the last 5-6 games?
Yeah, overall, I was pretty impressed, Mike. I think in past years, if they didn't have Joel, they would kind of, lost the identity of what they were trying to do. And to me, they played a really similar style. Obviously, they didn't have that go-to guy in the post that, generates so much of their offense through double teams. But in general, I thought they still followed a lot of the same principles, and they were able to pull out some tough wins. And obviously, I think we learned that they're not, they can't really contend with the best teams in the league without Joel. Obviously, their losses during this trip without Joel were to the Bucks, the Clippers, and then the Nuggets the other night. But I think, that's something that we obviously already knew. If they want to have a chance to really make some noise this season, they'll need a healthy Joel. But I do think that their play without him over the past couple of weeks was, pretty promising.
Yeah, MKB is with us here talking a little Sixers. And, as you tweeted out yesterday that they did a great job of holding down the fort without him. In previous years, they would have dropped in the standings. While they're not in the top spot, they're only a half game out. The point of it is they kind of showed that they are in this for the long haul, I think. Like that when they get him back, they should be able to go neck and neck. Now, some people have said, hey, the Nets have been doing this without Durant this whole time. So when you look at these two teams at full strength, George Hill, Joel Embiid, and this Nets squad, how do you see that matchup?
Yeah, it's obviously a tough one, Mike. I think, the Nets are just so talent heavy at this time. I think the Sixers might be a little bit deeper and more well-rounded. But if we're talking full health, that means Durant's back, obviously Kyrie and James Harden, and then, the additions that the Nets just made with LaMarcus Aldridge, Blake Griffin. And they've been getting solid production from other guys. Joe Harris has been the best three-point shooter in the league all season. Nick Claxton has developed into a nice big guy. Bruce Brown has been giving them great moments as a backup guard. So, I think the Sixers will have their hands full. It'll be interesting to me to see if they, the Sixers end up adding anybody on the buyout market. Obviously, the Nets got two guys in LaMarcus and Blake on that market that, I think the Sixers will need to fortify a little bit more. But as it stands right now, I think the Nets have the advantage when it comes to just, sheer talent.
MKB, I want to get your take, too, on, by the way, I want to throw this in. Joel Embiid out. The Sixers are 8-8 this year, 3-2 on the road trip. They'll play tonight. If they win, they'll be 4-2 on this trip without him. It would be inconceivable to think that they would go 4-trip on a road trip with him in the past.
Right. That's the thing, and I think that's the difference between this team than years past. I think they're a little bit mentally stronger. I think they have good leadership that we've seen. Dwight, some of his antics on the court recently have been questionable, but he's provided, really good veteran leadership, and so is Danny Green. Kind of just being there, keeping things steady in the locker room for the team and keeping, both of those guys obviously are fresh off of a championship run with the Lakers. And I think they've really helped to keep, the Sixers keep their eyes on the prize in the long run in terms of not getting too high or too low during this regular season and instead know that they, their eyes are on a championship. And I think overall it's been, it's definitely been an improvement over years past in terms of how they've been able to handle games without the big man.
Yeah, and getting him back is because they traded Bradley away. Doc Rivers talked about this the other day. They really have no other big man other than Dwight Howard, who, he is what he is. He's been a great addition, 15, 17 minutes, but you have to ask him, and you can't start him. Him and Ben Simmons cannot be on the floor offensively together.
No, that's been one of the bigger problems I think that we've noticed during this time without Joel. The spacing just really doesn't work. It reminds me sometimes of sets that we would see last year where Dwight's in the, down in the post in the dunker spot, as people like to say, and Ben is kind of just free roaming because he doesn't have somewhere to be. So I actually wouldn't be surprised, obviously, if the Sixers look to pick up, one more big guy, in the buyout market before the playoffs, just to kind of solidify that rotation. Tony Bradley played nice minutes for them, but obviously he wasn't going to play in the postseason unless Joel was hurt. So, it is something where I think they probably need to fortify that front court a little bit more to feel great about, themselves going into the postseason.
Yeah, I mean, Bradley gave him the minutes, as you said, but adding a third guy, that guy, I think they kicked the tires on Georgie Jang, and, the guy who could give them 4 to 6 minutes if they had to.
Exactly.
The rest of the way. But obviously, Joel's going to get a bulk of those minutes. And having Dwight Howard, I mean, that's going to be a big change for them come playoff time. Big problem in them in the playoffs the last couple of years has been, not last year so much. Last year was a totally different situation. But anytime they went to the bench behind Joel was a disaster. Monroe, that group of guys they had was pathetic.
Yeah, Amir Johnson, Kyle O'Quinn, just guys that were, past the hill. And Dwight, like you said, Mike, he's perfect for, coming off the bench and giving you 15 to 20 minutes of, energy and athleticism a game. He's, getting 10 rebounds, a couple offensive rebounds. He's a good finisher on rolls to the rim off pick and rolls and finishing there. So he's definitely the best big guy that they've had, backing up Joel since, they started to make this recent run over the past few years. And that will, he obviously also has the playoff experience. And I think that will be, very beneficial for them as long as he can kind of keep himself in check and keep his, keeping his emotions in check a little bit, which he's had some trouble with. I think he'll be a big boost for them in the playoffs for sure.
Yeah, no question. How do you feel George Hill fits in kind of the role that he'll have?
Oh, great. I thought that was a great addition. Obviously, it wasn't, as big as a name as a Kyle Lowry or a Victor Oladipo in terms of moving the needle. But George Hill is a guy that, for several years I thought would be a great fit on this Sixers team as a guy that he can run an offense. He has tons of experience as both a starting and a backup point guard. And he can also come in and play off the ball for times. He's a career 38% 3-point shooter, so he can space off Ben, space off Joel. And in the second unit, he's a guy with tons of experience that will, won't force the action. He can kind of come in, slow the pace down, run the offense for the guys. And that combined with his ability to shoot is something that they've, needed badly for the past couple of years. So it's, like I said, it's not a super huge, exciting name, but he's definitely a guy that I think will play a huge role for the Sixers in the postseason. That's why that Bradley move, I thought, it made sense. Bradley wasn't going to play a major role in the playoffs, where I think George Hill is going to come in and really have, carve out a nice role for himself moving forward.
What's it do, in your opinion, for Shake?
Not much. I think it'll take him off the ball a little bit more. Obviously, they've been coming in him. I think mostly it'll eliminate minutes for Tyrese Maxey moving forward, which obviously in the short term is unfortunate because he's a rookie. But for this team to be at its best, I think they want to have a veteran in there with the experience and the consistency of a George Hill. So I think Shake will still, the minutes will be the same. I think he'll have the ball in his hands a little bit more, or a little bit less, But I think overall he's still able to space the floor, and he'll still have the ball in his hands a lot because, like I said, George Hill can also play off ball. So I think it'll kind of be those two, running the offense for the second unit.
I know that everybody kind of has their feeling and thoughts on Tobias, and he did not have the best game the other night. It was almost like, hey, I can only carry us for so long. I think we kind of saw like, hey, he is what he is. But he obviously has had a much more consistently productive season. In a playoff game, do you think the Sixers go through Tobias Harris late, Joel Embiid late?
I think Joel is obviously option 1A, Mike, for them always. But this, the thing is, and obviously this in the postseason, it becomes hard to, sometimes run an offense, especially down in the final, in like the guts of the game, through a big man because he's, he needs to get the position. He needs to have someone that can, give him the pass into the post position, and it's, you can double him before he gets the ball. You can have someone front, someone behind him. Whereas Tobias is a guy that, you give the ball to on the perimeter, and he can hunt for a mismatch, get downhill, and hunt for his own shot. So I think they're going to rely on, a combination of both of those guys, but there's certainly going to be, a lot of times where, Joel is not going to be able to be the focal point of the offense on any given possession. And at that point, I think Tobias is, clearly established himself as the go-to guy, or the closer, if you want to call him that.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that all works out. Now that it seems like they have two options where before we weren't sure. Obviously, how do you think Embiid, they handle him this last month of the season? Is he back? Is he playing Saturday, not Sunday? How do you think they handle him?
I would say cautious, Mike. That would be my guess. I wouldn't be shocked if he sat, a couple back-to-backs if his minutes were a little bit down, especially as soon as he first comes back here this weekend moving forward. Because, it's the same thing we've been talking about. Obviously, he probably, hurt his case at MVP by missing so many games already. So that's kind of on the back burner. And at this point, for the Sixers and for Joel, it's about getting farther than they have, hopefully to a conference finals, potentially to the NBA finals. Best way to do that, obviously, is to maximize his health. They've, established themselves as a legitimate team in the East. So the toughest thing is going to be balancing the fight for that top seed in the East while keeping Joel fresh. And, to me, I think they'll err on the side of, keeping Joel fresh and healthy for the playoffs, even if it means potentially, dropping a game or two here down the stretch and impacting their final positioning.
Yeah, no Joel tonight, by the way. He'll be most likely back on Saturday, it looks like. They also play Sunday against Memphis. Then they're back on Tuesday against Boston. Michael Kaskey-Blomain, CBS Sports, is with us. Now, Michael also covers the entire NBA. You look at this Eastern Conference. We talked a little about Brooklyn. Are people not paying enough attention to the Bucks? Because normally – the Bucks are like 10 games up on the East by now. They're on their way to 63 wins. This is different this year, but are they actually a better Bucks team?
I think so, Mike, and that's honestly a great question. I think obviously people kind of got a little bit tired. 2 seasons in a row, the Bucks kind of dominating the regular season and then falling short in the postseason. So I think the fact that they're flying under the radar a little bit, it's deserved if you want to say it that way. Obviously, it's kind of a, show me in the postseason attitude at this point. But from watching them, and I've been watching a lot of Bucks games, they are, I think, a more dangerous team than they've been in the past. The Drew Holiday addition was really huge for them. And it obviously gave them another great defender. And more importantly, it gave them another go-to guy down the stretch of games. Big thing with them in the past has been that, Giannis isn't necessarily the best closer. Given the fact that, he doesn't space the floor, you can kind of scheme for him if you pack the paint and throw a couple bodies at him. And in the past, they've gone through Chris Middleton late in games a lot, which they still do. And now Drew Holiday is another guy that's a big guard that can hunt mismatches in the post or can, dribble and get into the paint and kick out to their shooters, which they have a lot of, tons of guys that can knock down shots. So to me, the Bucks are, just as good as they've been in the past, probably deeper and, just as dangerous.
Who's number 4 for you?
It's wide open. Probably at the end of the season, I'll probably see the Miami Heat sliding into that spot. They've been really inconsistent, but they've had some injury issues, some health issues. Now they got Oladipo in there to pair with, Jimmy Butler and the rest of their guys. Just out of, the fact that the conference after those top 3 seeds, it's not, not super stacked. It's kind of open there. The Celtics have been disappointing. There's a lot of up-and-coming teams, the Hornets, the Hawks, the Knicks, but I think eventually it'll be the Heat that establish themselves as that 4th team in the East.
All right, so let's say, for instance, I think the Heat are they still the 8th seed right now?
No, they shot up to 5th after their win last night. It's so close in those last 4 spots.
It was a 1-game. Well, let's just, if you were the 1 seed Philly and you got stuck playing Miami in the first round 8, would that concern you?
Obviously it wouldn't be ideal. I think you'd rather face off one of these teams with a little bit less experience than a Heat team that just went to the finals last year and is, has veterans like Jimmy and Iguodala on the roster. I think if you're the Sixers and you work all season to get a top 1 or 2 seed, you'd rather see, an up and coming team like the Hornets, the Knicks, the Hawks, one of those teams that just, will be happy to get to the playoffs, but doesn't necessarily have the experience to move forward. I think if you end up facing the Celtics or the Heat in the first round, I do think the Sixers should win. I don't think, talent-wise they do have the advantage, but, if you're drawing out your ideal matchups, that certainly wouldn't be the team you'd want to see in the first round.
Should be interesting. As Michael said, yeah, there's a mess at 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 in the East. It's going to be a free-for-all for those spots. Sixers, Bucks, and Nets all battling for 1, 2, 3. Everybody else battling through 4 for 8. The East is kind of interesting. Michael Kaskey-Blomain at The Real Mike KB, CBS Sports NBA writer here on Inside the Sixers on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. All right, man, I got to see you soon. I got to get up to one of these games. Are they letting people back in yet?
It's been a minute. We're going on a year now, at least.
They won't let it. They only allow one of us in at a time.
True. Maybe by the playoffs.
Hopefully. All right, pal. I'll see you.
Good talking to you, Mike. Thank you.
All right, MKB, everybody. Michael Kaskey-Blomain, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline.